Chapter 1. The Silent Stage, London, 1935. The majestic Opera House stood as a beacon of grandeur amidst the fog-draped streets of Covent Garden, its golden facade glowing under the gaslights. Inside, velvet drapes framed a stage where dreams were sung into existence, and tonight the air thrummed with anticipation. The season's most celebrated soprano, Celestina Montrose, was to perform La Traviata, her voice a siren's call that had drawn lords, ladies, and common folk alike to fill every seat. The orchestra swelled, and the curtain rose. Celestina, resplendent in a gown of crimson silk, stepped into the spotlight. Her voice soared, pure and piercing, weaving Violetta's tragic tale. The audience sat spellbound, until, in the midst of her aria, a peculiar hush fell. Celestina faltered, her hand fluttering to her throat. The notes died. She swayed, then turned as if to flee, vanishing into the wings with a gasp that echoed through the silent hall. For a moment, no one moved. The conductor's baton froze mid-air. Then a murmur rippled through the crowd, swelling to a cacophony of alarm. "Where is she?" cried a woman in the stalls. "Is she ill?" shouted another. Backstage, stagehands scrambled, shouting orders, their footsteps thudding against the wooden floor. The manager, Mr. Reginald Thorne, a portly man with a wilting moustache, appeared on stage, his face ashen. "Ladies and gentlemen," he stammered, mopping his brow with a handkerchief, "I regret to inform you that tonight's performance must be halted. An unforeseen circumstance has arisen. Please remain calm." Calm was not forthcoming. The audience surged toward the exits, whispering of illness, scandal, or worse. Backstage, chaos reigned. The stagehands searched the wings, the dressing rooms, the trapdoors, anywhere Celestina might have gone. But the Prima Donna, the songbird of London, had vanished without a trace. In the midst of this pandemonium, a solitary figure stood at the edge of the orchestra pit, observing the scene with a calm that seemed almost unnatural. Hercule Poirot, his moustache impeccably waxed, his patent leather shoes gleaming, adjusted his bow tie, and turned to his companion, Captain Arthur Hastings. "Mon ami," Poirot said, his voice low and precise, "this is no ordinary mishap. The stage, it is a place of illusion, yes. But tonight, I suspect we are witness to a mystery most profound." Hastings, his honest face creased with worry, glanced at the chaos unfolding. "Good heavens, Poirot, you don't think foul play?" Poirot's green eyes glinted. "I think, Hastings, that when a star vanishes in the midst of her song, it is not the curtain that falls, but a veil that lifts. Come, we must speak with Monsieur Thorne. The little grey cells, they are already at work." They moved toward the stage, where Thorne was barking orders at a trembling stagehand. "Find her! Confound it! She can't have just evaporated." "Pardon, monsieur," Poirot interjected, his voice cutting through the din like a knife. "I am Hercule Poirot, and this is my associate, Captain Hastings. Perhaps we may be of assistance in this curious matter." Thorne blinked, his face a mixture of relief and suspicion. "Poirot, the detective fellow? Well, I suppose we need all the help we can get. Celestina Montrose, gone, mid-performance. It's unheard of." "Précisément," Poirot murmured, his gaze sweeping the stage. The crimson curtain swayed slightly, as if whispering secrets. "Tell me, Monsieur Thorne, when did you last see Mademoiselle Montrose before her disappearance?" Thorne mopped his brow again. "Just before the second act. She was in fine spirits, radiant as ever. Said she felt the roll in her bones tonight. Then, poof, gone, like a ghost." Poirot's eyes narrowed. "A ghost, you say?" "Non, non, monsieur. Ghosts do not wear crimson silk, nor do they leave an audience in such disarray. There is method here, and we shall find it. As the manager led them toward the wings, Hastings whispered, "Poirot, what do you make of it? An accident, perhaps, or something sinister?" Poirot paused, his hand resting on a velvet rope. "Hastings, the stage is a place of artifice, where truth hides behind grease paint and song. But mark my words, mon ami, this vanishing is no act, it is the overture to a crime." The lights flickered, casting long shadows across the stage. Somewhere in the darkened corridors of the majestic opera house, a secret waited to be uncovered. "Hey, detective, quick question. Where in the world are you solving mysteries from? Drop your city in the comments. And if you want more twisted tales, hit that subscribe button, because tomorrow's case, it gets even creepier. Stay sharp." Chapter 2. Enter Poirot. The majestic opera house, though still grand in its bones, seemed to quiver with unease as Hercule Poirot and Captain Hastings navigated its labyrinthine corridors. The scent of grease paint and old wood hung heavy, mingling with the faint tang of panic that lingered from the evening's disruption. Backstage, the air buzzed with the low hum of whispered arguments and clattering props, as if the very walls mourned the absence of their star. Poirot, his small frame impeccable in a tailored suit, moved with the precision of a cat, his eyes darting to every detail. A discarded feather from a costume, a smudge of rouge on a doorframe, a crumpled program trodden underfoot. Hastings, trailing behind, clutched his hat and tried to match his friend's composure, though his wide eyes betrayed his agitation. "Good Lord, Poirot," Hastings muttered, sidestepping a stagehand hauling a coil of rope. "This place is a madhouse. How do you propose to find a woman in all this chaos?" Poirot's moustache twitched, a faint smile playing beneath it. "Chaos, mon ami, is merely a puzzle in disarray. The little grey cells, they thrive on such disorder. We begin by observing, by listening. The truth, it hides in the details." They reached the manager's office, a cramped room stuffed with velvet chairs and a desk drowning in papers. Reginald Thorne, still perspiring, stood wringing his hands as he introduced the small assembly gathered there. "Monsieur Poirot, Captain Hastings, these are the principal figures of our company. Dreadful business, this. Simply dreadful." First was Maestro Giovanni Torretti, the conductor, a wiry Italian with a shock of silver hair and eyes that burned like coals. He leaned against the wall, his baton tapping an impatient rhythm against his palm. "This is a catastrophe," he snapped, his accent thick with indignation. "Celestina, she is my muse, my Violetta. Without her, the opera is nothing." Poirot inclined his head. "Monsieur Torretti, your passion for Mademoiselle Montrose is evident. Tell me, when did you last speak with her?" Torretti's baton stilled. "Before the performance, I told her to feel the music, to let it consume her. She was distracted, perhaps, but I thought nothing of it." "Distracted?" Poirot's voice was soft, but his gaze was sharp. "In what manner, if you please?" Torretti hesitated, then shrugged. She looked uneasy. Her eyes kept darting to the wings, as if expecting someone. Next was Helena Hartwell, the understudy, a striking young woman with auburn hair pinned tightly and a smile that seemed more calculated than warm. She sat poised, her hands folded, but her foot tapped nervously beneath her skirt. "I was in my dressing room when it happened," she said, unprompted. "I heard the commotion and came at once. Poor Celestina." "Poor, you say?" Poirot's eyebrows rose. "Yet the understudy, she steps into the spotlight when the star falls. No? A fortunate opportunity, perhaps. Elena's smile faltered. I'd never wish harm on Celestina, Monsieur Poirot. I admired her. Poirot merely nodded, his expression unreadable. Then there was Lord Henry Ashworth, the opera's chief patron, a tall man with a patrician air and a silk cravat that screamed wealth. His face was pale, and his fingers toyed with a gold watch chain. "This is a scandal," he said, his voice clipped. "The Majestic cannot afford such a spectacle. I trust you'll resolve this quickly, Monsieur Poirot." "Mais oui, milord," Poirot replied smoothly. "But tell me, were you acquainted with Mademoiselle Montrose beyond her performances?" Ashworth's jaw tightened. "I admired her talent, naturally. As a patron, one takes an interest in the company." "Naturellement," Poirot murmured, though his eyes lingered on Ashworth's twitching fingers. Finally, there was Clara Wren, the wardrobe mistress, a slight woman with sharp features and hands stained with dye. She hovered near the door, her eyes red-rimmed. "I saw her just before she went on," Clara said softly. "She was wearing the crimson gown I made for her. She looked like an angel. Then she was gone." Poirot turned to her, his voice gentle. "Mademoiselle Wren, did you notice anything unusual? A tear in the gown, perhaps, a visitor to her dressing-room?" Clara frowned, thinking. "There was a man earlier, in a dark coat, lurking near her door. I didn't see his face. I thought he was a delivery boy, but he didn't stay long." "A man, you say?" Poirot's eyes gleamed. "Most interesting." Hastings, unable to contain himself, blurted, "Poirot, this is a tangle. A conductor, an understudy, a lord, and now some mysterious stranger. Where do we even begin?" Poirot adjusted his cufflinks, unperturbed. "We begin, Hastings, with the stage itself, the place where Mademoiselle Montrose vanished. Come, let us examine the scene of this theatrical crime." As they left the office, Poirot paused, his gaze falling on a poster of Celestina Montrose, her face radiant, her eyes haunting. "She was a star," he said softly, almost to himself. "And stars, they do not simply fade, they are eclipsed." The corridor echoed with their footsteps as they moved toward the stage, where the crimson curtain hung like a silent witness to the night's enigma. Chapter 3. The cast of characters. The majestic opera house, though momentarily stilled by the night's calamity, seemed to hum with secrets, as Hercule Poirot and Captain Hastings lingered in the wings. The stage, now empty, was a cavern of shadows, its crimson curtain swaying like a conspirator, whispering to the dark. Poirot's eyes, bright and unyielding, scanned the space, as if the very boards might confess what they had witnessed. Hastings, less composed, fidgeted with his tie, his gaze darting to the assembled company members who had gathered at Poirot's request. "Mon ami," Poirot said, his voice a quiet command, "observe the players in this drama. Each has a role, and each, I suspect, hides a script of their own. Let us meet them properly, yes?" The group stood in a tense semicircle, their faces a gallery of unease. Maestro Giovanni Torretti, the conductor, was first to speak, his silver hair glinting under the stage lights. "This is absurd," he snapped, brandishing his baton like a sword. "Celestina was the soul of this company. Who would dare harm her? You waste time, Monsieur Poirot, when we should be searching." Poirot's moustache twitched. "Patience, Maestro. To search without direction is to chase shadows. Tell me, what was your relationship with Mademoiselle Montrose?" Torretti's eyes flashed. "She was my muse, as I said. Her voice, it was divine, a gift from the heavens. We worked closely, perfecting every note. She trusted me." "Trusted, perhaps," Poirot mused. "But was there more? A personal connection, peut-être?" The conductor's face reddened. You imply scandal? I am a married man, monsieur. My devotion was to her art, nothing more. Beside him, Elena Hartwell, the understudy, let out a soft scoff, quickly masked by a cough. Poirot's gaze shifted to her, sharp as a spotlight. Mademoiselle Hartwell, you seem to have thoughts on this matter. Speak, if you please. Elena's auburn hair caught the light as she tilted her chin defiantly. I meant nothing, Monsieur Poirot, only that the maestro was possessive of Celestina. He resented anyone who came too close, especially Lord Ashworth. Lord Henry Ashworth, standing stiffly in his immaculate evening suit, bristled. That is preposterous. My interest in Celestina was purely professional, a patron's pride in a star. I funded her costumes, her tours. She was grateful, nothing more. Grateful, Poirot echoed, his tone deceptively mild. And yet, my lord, your presence at rehearsals was frequent, was it not? More frequent, perhaps, was it not? More frequent, perhaps, than a patron's duties require. Ashworth's fingers tightened on his watch chain. I enjoy the opera. Is that a crime? Poirot did not reply, instead turning to Clara Wren, the wardrobe mistress, who stood clutching a swatch of velvet, her eyes downcast. Mademoiselle Wren, you knew Mademoiselle Montrose well. You dressed her, tended to her needs. What can you tell us of her entanglements? Clara's voice was barely above a whisper. Celestina was kind but guarded. She had admirers, of course. Men sent flowers, letters, gifts, but she kept them at arm's length. Except, she hesitated, glancing at Elena. Except, Poirot prompted, his voice gentle but insistent. Except for Mr. Julian Vance, Clara said reluctantly. The tenor, they were close, too close, some said. There were rumors of a romance, but Celestina laughed them off. Still, I saw them whispering together, late at night after rehearsals. All eyes turned to Julian Vance, a young man with a poet's face and dark, soulful eyes. He had been silent until now, leaning against a prop table, but at Clara's words he straightened, his expression stormy. That's nonsense, he said, his voice low but fierce. Celestina and I were friends, nothing more. We shared a passion for music, for the stage. If people want to spin gossip, let them, but I'd never hurt her. Poirot's gaze lingered on Vance, noting the clenched fists, the flicker of pain in his eyes. Monsieur Vance, where were you when Mademoiselle Montrose vanished? I was in the chorus room, preparing for my entrance, Vance said quickly. Ask anyone. I didn't even see her during the second act. Convenient, Elena muttered, her lips curling. Enough, Toretti barked, his baton slicing the air. This bickering is pointless. Celestina is missing, and you stand here trading accusations like schoolchildren. Poirot raised a hand, silencing the room. Non, non, maestro. Accusations, they are the threads of truth, tangled though they may be. Mademoiselle Montrose, she was the centre of many desires, many envies. A rival, a lover, a patron, a friend. Each of you had a reason to wish her on that stage, or off it. Hastings, who had been scribbling notes in a small pad, looked up, bewildered. Poirot, this is a regular nest of vipers. Rivalries, romances, how do you make sense of it? Poirot smiled faintly. By listening, Hastings, by watching. The heart, it betrays itself in the smallest gestures. A glance, a pause, a word unspoken. Already, the little grey cells, they begin to see the shape of this drama. He turned to the group, his voice calm but commanding. Return to your quarters, mes amis, but remain in the opera house. No one leaves until Hercule Poirot permits it. Tomorrow we shall visit the dressing room of Mademoiselle Montrose. There, I think the stage will speak. As the company dispersed, muttering and casting wary glances, Poirot lingered, his eyes fixed on the crimson curtain. "Hastings," he said softly, "this is no mere disappearance. It is a performance, carefully staged, and we, mon ami, must find the script." The shadows deepened, and the majestic opera house held its breath, waiting for the next act. Chapter 4. Secrets Behind the Curtain. The morning light filtered weakly through the high windows of the majestic opera house, casting a pale glow over the backstage corridors. Hercule Poirot, his patent leather shoes clicking softly on the polished floor, led Captain Hastings toward Celestina Montrose's dressing room. The air was thick with the scent of roses, powder, and something sharper. Fear, perhaps, lingering from the previous night's chaos. The stage, silent now, seemed to watch them, its crimson curtain a mute sentinel guarding its secrets. "Poirot," Hastings said, his voice hushed as they approached the door, "this place gives me the creeps. It's as if the walls themselves know something." Poirot's moustache twitched with amusement. "Mon ami, walls do not speak, but they listen. And in a place like this, they hear much. Let us see what Mademoiselle Montrose's sanctum reveals." The dressing-room was a shrine to the Prima Donna's brilliance. A gilded mirror dominated one wall, surrounded by vases of wilting roses and photographs of Celestina in various roles: Violetta, Carmen, Mimi. Her crimson gown from the fateful performance hung on a mannequin, its silk shimmering like spilled blood. A vanity table overflowed with powders, lipsticks, and a silver hairbrush, engraved with the initials C.M. Poirot's eyes swept the room, missing nothing. He paused at the vanity, lifting a single white glove, its lace edge frayed. "Curious," he murmured. "A lady so meticulous, yet this glove is worn. Why was it not replaced?" Hastings frowned. Perhaps she was in a hurry. No, Hastings. A star does not hurry. She prepares. This glove, it tells a story." Poirot set it down and moved to a small writing desk, where a pile of letters lay scattered. He lifted one, his gloved fingers careful not to smudge it. The paper was cheap, the handwriting jagged, the ink a harsh black. "Leave the stage, or you will sing your last," Poirot read aloud, his voice steady. "And another. Your voice is a lie. End it, or I will. Mon Dieu, these are not the words of an admirer." Hastings peered over his shoulder, his face paling. "Threatening letters, Poirot. Good heavens, someone wanted her gone." "Précisément," Poirot said, slipping the letters into an envelope for later scrutiny. But who? A rival? A spurned lover? Or someone with a deeper grudge? His gaze fell on a small locket, half hidden beneath a program. He opened it to reveal a miniature portrait of a young man, dark-haired and solemn. And who, I wonder, is this? Before Hastings could speculate, a knock sounded, and Clara Wren, the wardrobe mistress, appeared, her hands twisting nervously. "Monsieur Poirot, you wanted to see the crew?" "Oui, mademoiselle. But first, this locket. Do you recognize the face?" Clara's eyes widened. That's Julian Vance, the tenor. Celestina kept it close. She said it was a keepsake, nothing more." Poirot's eyebrows rose. "A keepsake, yet so intimate. Merci, Mademoiselle Wren. Now send in the stage crew, one by one." First came Tom Barker, the grizzled stage manager. His face lined from years of wrangling props and tempers. "I was at the fly rail when she vanished," he said gruffly. "Heard her stop singing, then nothing. By the time I got to the wings, she was gone. Trapdoors were all locked. I checked myself." Poirot nodded, his eyes on Barker's calloused hands. "And did you see anyone unusual, monsieur?" "A stranger, perhaps, as Mademoiselle Wren mentioned." Barker scratched his chin. There was a bloke in a dark coat, skulking about before the show. Thought he was delivering flowers, but he didn't have none. Slipped out quick when I called to him. Most interesting, Poirot said, making a mental note. Next was Maggie Poole, a young stagehand with nervous eyes and ink-stained fingers. I was working the curtains, she said, her voice trembling. Miss Montrose. She was right there then. Nothing. It was like magic, sir. Magic, mademoiselle? Poirot's voice was gentle but probing. Or perhaps a trick of the stage. Did you see this man in the dark coat? Maggie nodded. Aye, near the prop room. He was muttering something, but I couldn't hear. Looked angry, though. The final crew member was Bertie Shaw, a lighting technician with a limp and a surly demeanour. I was up in the rig, adjusting the spots, he said, avoiding Poirot's gaze. Didn't see nothing till the audience started shouting. Poirot's eyes narrowed. And yet, monsieur, you were in a position to see much. The lights, they did not flicker during Mademoiselle Montrose's aria. Bertie shifted uncomfortably. Might have been a moment's dimness. Happens sometimes, old wiring. Old wiring, Poirot echoed, his tone sceptical. Or a deliberate act. We shall see. As the crew departed, Hastings shook his head. Poirot, this is a maze. Threatening letters, a mysterious stranger, a locket with Fancy's picture. Where does it all lead? Poirot stood before the crimson gown, his fingers brushing the silk. It leads, Hastings, to a truth hidden in plain sight. These letters, this locket, this glove, they are props in a larger performance. But who is the director of this drama? That is what Hercule Poirot must discover. He turned, his gaze falling on the mirror, where a faint smudge of lipstick formed a single word. Beware. Poirot's lips curved in a grim smile. The stage, it speaks at last, and we, mon ami, must listen. Chapter 5. A Voice from the Past. The majestic opera house, though bathed in the grey light of a London morning, seemed to cling to the shadows of its secrets. Hercule Poirot stood in Celestina Montrose's dressing-room, his gloved hands clasping the threatening letters found the previous day. The word beware, scrawled in lipstick on the mirror, stared back at him like a silent accusation. Captain Hastings, ever the faithful companion, paced nervously, his brow furrowed. Poirot, Hastings said, glancing at the crimson gown still hanging on its mannequin. Those letters are chilling. And that word on the mirror, do you think Celestina wrote it herself? A warning, perhaps? Poirot's green eyes gleamed. A warning, oui, but to whom? And from whom? The little grey cells. They whisper that Mademoiselle Montrose was not merely a songbird, but a woman with a past that sings its own dark melody. Come, Hastings, we must dig deeper. Their inquiry led them to the Opera House's archive, a dusty room beneath the stage where programs, contracts, and faded photographs were stored in crumbling boxes. Mr. Reginald Thorne, the manager, hovered anxiously as Poirot sifted through a file marked Celestina Montrose. The documents were sparse. Contracts, glowing reviews, a few letters of recommendation. But one item caught Poirot's eye. A yellowed newspaper clipping from 1928, tucked into the back of the file. Regardez, Hastings, Poirot said, holding the clipping to the light. The headline read, Soprano's Scandal Rocks Paris Opera. The article described a young singer, Celeste Moreau, who vanished from Paris after being implicated in a theft of jewels from a wealthy patron. The description of Celeste, raven-haired, with a voice like a nightingale, matched Celestina Montrose uncannily. "Good heavens!" Hastings exclaimed. "Do you think Celestina and this Celeste Moreau are one and the same?" Poirot's moustache twitched. It is not a coincidence, mon ami. Names, they change like costumes, but the voice, it is unique. We must confirm this with someone who knew her then. Thorn, mopping his gaped brow, stammered, I knew nothing of this. Celestina came to us 3 years ago, recommended by a Viennese impresario. Her past was unremarkable, or so I thought. Unremarkable. Poirot's tone was sharp. No, monsieur. A woman does not rise to such heights without leaving footprints. Who else knew her before London? Thorn hesitated, then said, Maestro Terretti. He worked with her in Vienna before she joined us. He might know more. Poirot and Hastings found Maestro Giovanni Terretti in the rehearsal hall, conducting an invisible orchestra with furious sweeps of his baton. His silver hair was dishevelled, his eyes red-rimmed. Monsieur Poirot, he said, barely pausing, I am trying to salvage this season. What do you want now? Information, Maestro, Poirot replied calmly. About Mademoiselle Montrose, or should I say Celeste Moreau? Terretti's baton froze mid-air, his face paling. Celeste? How did you— He recovered quickly, his voice sharp. That was a lifetime ago. She left that name behind in Paris. She was young, foolish. A scandal, yes, but she was innocent. Innocent? Poirot's eyebrows rose. A theft of jewels is no small matter. Tell me, what do you know of this affair? Terretti sighed, sinking onto a chair. In Paris, she was accused of stealing a diamond brooch from a patron, Madame Dubois. The evidence was flimsy. A maid's testimony, nothing more. But the scandal ruined her. She fled to Vienna, changed her name, and rebuilt her career. I met her there, helped her start anew. She swore she was innocent, and I believed her. And yet, Poirot said, someone here may have known her secret. Perhaps someone who followed her from Paris. Terretti's eyes narrowed. You suspect blackmail. Impossible. She would have told. Terretti's eyes narrowed. You suspect blackmail. Impossible. She would have told me. Would she? Poirot mused. Or did she fear to lose her new life? Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of a new figure. Madame Elise Dubois, a formidable Frenchwoman in her 50s, her fur stole and pearl necklace proclaiming her wealth. She had been spotted in the audience the night of the disappearance, and her presence now sent a ripple of tension through the room. Monsieur Poirot, she said, her voice icy, I hear you are meddling in matters that do not concern you. I am merely a patron, here to enjoy the opera. Mais oui, madame, Poirot said, bowing slightly. Yet I find it curious that you, who once accused Celeste Moreau of theft, are here in London, where Celestina Montrose vanishes. A coincidence, no? Madame Dubois' lips tightened. I have no connection to that woman's disappearance. I forgave her long ago. The past is the past. Perhaps, Poirot said, his gaze unwavering. But the past, it has a way of singing again, does it not? As Madame Dubois swept out, Hastings whispered, Poirot, this is explosive. If Celestina was Celeste Moreau, someone might have wanted revenge or silence. Exactement, Poirot said, his eyes on the door through which Madame Dubois had vanished. A scandal, a secret, and now a new suspect. The songbird's past, it seems, has flown back to haunt her. We must learn who else knew of Celeste Moreau. The archive room grew darker, the air heavy with the weight of old sins. Somewhere in the majestic opera house, the truth waited, cloaked in the echoes of a forgotten aria. Chapter 6. The conductor's baton. The rehearsal hall of the majestic opera house was a cavern of echoes, its high ceiling swallowing the faint clatter of footsteps and the distant hum of London beyond. Hercule Poirot stood near the conductor's podium. his gloved hands clasped behind his back, his green eyes fixed on Maestro Giovanni Torretti. The conductor, his silver hair gleaming under the gaslights, was pacing like a caged lion, his baton slashing the air as if to summon the absent Celestina Montrose back to the stage. "Mon ami," Poirot said, his voice cutting through the tension, "you are a man of passion, of music. Yet I sense that Mademoiselle Montrose was more to you than a mere soprano. Tell me, what was she to Giovanni Torretti?" Torretti stopped, his baton trembling in his grip. "She was everything," he said, his voice hoarse. "Her voice, it was a flame, a force that could move the gods. I built this season around her, crafted every note to her strengths. Without her, I am nothing." Captain Hastings, standing by a row of velvet chairs, raised an eyebrow. "Bit dramatic, isn't it, Poirot?" "Sounds like he was half in love with her." Poirot's moustache twitched. "Love, Hastings, or obsession? The line, it is thin. Maestro, you knew her as Celeste Moreau in Vienna, oui? Did you also know of her enemies, those who might wish to silence her song?" Torretti's eyes flashed. Enemies? She had none. Rivals, perhaps, jealous singers, petty critics, but no one who would— He trailed off, his gaze dropping to the baton in his hand. "You think I know something, don't you?" "I think," Poirot said softly, "that a man who calls a woman his muse sees more than he says. You watched her closely, Maestro. Did you see nothing unusual the night she vanished?" Torretti hesitated, then gestured to the podium. "I was here conducting. The orchestra was in chaos when she stopped singing. I tried to hold them together, but the audience, they were shouting, and I could barely think. I saw her turn, clutch her throat, and then she was gone, into the wings." Poirot nodded, stepping closer to the podium. His eyes fell on the conductor's score, a thick sheaf of pages marked with furious pencil notes. Tucked between the pages was a small folded note, its edges worn. Poirot's gloved fingers plucked it free, unfolding it with care. The handwriting was familiar, jagged, like the threatening letters from Celestina's dressing room. It read, "You cannot control. Her forever, she will fly free." "Mon Dieu," Poirot murmured. "This note, Maestro, it was not meant for Mademoiselle Montrose, but for you. Who wrote it?" Torretti's face drained of color. I don't know. I found it in my coat pocket 2 days ago. I thought it was nonsense, a prank. I didn't connect it to her disappearance." Hastings, peering over Poirot's shoulder, gasped, "Poirot, this is a clue. Someone was warning him, or threatening him. But why?" Poirot's eyes narrowed. "Why, indeed? Maestro, you spoke of rivals. Was there one who envied your influence over Celestina? Someone who resented your control?" Torretti's jaw tightened. "Elena Hartwell," he said at last, "the understudy. She was always hovering, watching Celestina like a hawk. She wanted the spotlight, and she thought I favored Celestina too much. Once, I overheard her muttering that I'd regret tying the company's fortunes to one singer." "Most interesting," Poirot said, slipping the note into his pocket. "And what of Julian Vance, the tenor? His portrait was in her locket. Did you approve of their closeness?" Torretti's baton snapped in his hand, the crack echoing in the hall. "Vance," he spat, "a boy with a pretty voice and no discipline. He fawned over her, yes, but she was too wise for him. I told her to keep her distance. She didn't need distractions." Poirot's gaze lingered on the broken baton, its splintered end gleaming. "A distraction, or a threat to your vision? You are a man who demands perfection, Maestro. Did Celestina ever defy you?" Torretti's eyes darkened. "She was headstrong, yes. Lately, she questioned my tempos, my staging. She wanted more freedom in her performances, but I would never harm her. Never." Poirot inclined his head, his expression unreadable. Merci, maestro. You have been most illuminating. We shall speak again. As Terretti stormed off, Hastings shook his head. Poirot, he's a bundle of nerves. That note, it's a bombshell. Do you think he's hiding something? Always, Hastings, Poirot said, his voice low. The heart of a man like Terretti is a symphony of pride and passion. This note, it is a discord in his music. We must find who played it. He bent to examine the broken baton, noting a faint stain on its handle. Dark, almost like dry blood. And this, he said softly, is a note that sings of violence. The stage, it seems, is not the only place where blood may spill. The rehearsal hall fell silent, the air heavy with the weight of secrets yet to be uncovered. Chapter 7. Poisoned Notes. The manager's office at the majestic opera house was a cramped sanctuary of chaos, its desk buried under programs, receipts, and the weight of the previous night's calamity. Hercule Poirot sat at the desk, his gloved hands carefully arranging the threatening letters from Celestina Montrose's dressing room, alongside the note found in Maestro Terretti's score. The jagged handwriting of each seemed to pulse with malice, and the word beware on Celestina's mirror lingered in Poirot's mind like a haunting refrain. Captain Hastings stood by the window, peering out at the foggy London street, his face a mixture of curiosity and unease. Poirot, Hastings said, turning from the window, those letters are beastly things. Leave the stage, or you will sing your last. It's enough to make one's blood run cold. And that note to Terretti. Do you think they're from the same hand? Poirot's green eyes glinted as he adjusted his pince-nez, studying the papers with the precision of a surgeon. That, mon ami, is the question. The words, they are venomous, but it is the hand that bites them that will lead us to the truth. Observe, if you please. He laid out 3 letters from Celestina's desk. Leave the stage, or you will sing your last. Your voice is a lie. End it, or I will. And a 3rd, more cryptic. The spotlight burns. Step away, or be consumed. Beside them, he placed Terretti's note. You cannot control her forever. She will fly free. The ink was black, the paper cheap, but Poirot's attention was on the loops and slashes of the script. The handwriting, Poirot said, it shares certain traits. The L in leave and control. See how it leans, as if impatient. The T in stage, and Terretti, it is crossed with a flourish, almost defiant, but we must be certain. Hastings, fetch me a magnifying glass from Mr. Thorne's desk. Hastings rummaged through the clutter, producing a tarnished glass. Poirot peered through it, his moustache twitching. Wait, the ink is identical cheap, with a slight sheen of blue under light. The paper, too, is of the same stock, coarse, mass-produced, the kind sold in any stationer's shop. But this, he pointed to a faint watermark, barely visible on one letter. A crest, perhaps. We shall need to trace its origin. Hastings frowned. But Poirot, anyone could buy such paper. And the handwriting, couldn't it be forged? Or written by someone clever enough to disguise their style? Poirot smiled faintly. A clever mind, yes, but even the cleverest cannot hide their nature entirely. The pressure of the pen, the angle of the stroke, these are the fingerprints of the soul. We must compare these to samples from our suspects. At Poirot's request, Reginald Thorne provided writing samples from the opera company's principal members, collected under the guise of routine paperwork. Poirot spread them out. Terretti's bold, angular script, Elena Hartwell's tight, precise hand, Lord Ashworth's elegant cursive, Julian Vance's sprawling, almost boyish scrawl, and Clara Wren's delicate, looping letters. He studied each under the magnifying glass, his lips pursed. "Regardez, Hastings," Poirot said, pointing to Elena's sample. "Her L has a similar impatience, but the I do flourish is absent. Monsieur Vance's hand is too loose, too careless. Lord Ashworth's is controlled, but the ink pressure is lighter. Maestro Toretti's script is forceful, yet the T lacks the defiance we see here. And Mademoiselle Wren—" He paused, his eyes narrowing. "Her loops are close, but the angle is wrong." Hastings scratched his head. "So, none of them match? We're back to square one?" "No, no," Poirot said, his voice sharp. "The absence of a match is itself a clue. Either our writer is not among these samples, or they have disguised their hand, a task requiring great skill. But there is another detail." He lifted one of Celestina's letters, sniffing it gently. "A faint scent. Lavender, perhaps. It is not from the paper itself. Someone handled this letter who uses such a fragrance." Hastings brightened. "Lavender. That's something to go on. Clara Wren, she's always fussing with fabrics. Might she use scented sachets?" "Perhaps," Poirot said, "but we must not leap to conclusions. We need more. Monsieur Thorne, have you a record of the stationers who supply the opera house?" Thorne, hovering nervously, nodded. "We buy paper from Grayson's on Drury Lane. Cheap stuff, for notes and programs. Anyone could have taken a sheet." "Anyone?" Poirot echoed. "But not everyone writes poison with such precision. We shall visit this Grayson's and inquire about their watermarked stock. And we must speak again with Mademoiselle Wren. A mention of a man in a darker coat, it nags at the little grey cells." As they prepared to leave, Poirot paused, his gaze falling on the broken baton from Toretti's outburst, now stored in a small evidence bag. The dark stain on its handle seemed to pulse under the light. "This baton," he said softly, "it is a silent witness. We must test this stain. Blood, perhaps, or something more theatrical. Grease paint, ink, the laboratory will tell us." Hastings shivered. "Poirot, this is getting darker by the minute. Those letters, that stain. Do you think Celestina's still alive?" Poirot's eyes were grave. "I hope, mon ami, but hope is not certainty. These notes, they are not merely threats, they are a score, written for a purpose, and Hercule Poirot will read their music to the end." The office door closed behind them, leaving the threatening letters on the desk, their words whispering of secrets yet to be unveiled. Chapter 8. The Understudies' Moment. The majestic opera house, though grand in its gilded arches and velvet seats, seemed to shrink under the weight of its secrets, as Hercule Poirot and Captain Hastings made their way to the small rehearsal room, where Eleanor Hartwell practiced. The faint trill of her voice, rich but lacking the ethereal spark of Celestina Montrose's, drifted through the corridor, a reminder of the show's understudy waiting in the wings. The air was heavy with the scent of dust and ambition, and the crimson curtain in the distance hung like a barrier between truth and pretense. Poirot, his patent leather shoes silent on the worn carpet, paused outside the door, his green eyes gleaming with purpose. "Mon ami," he said to Hastings, "Mademoiselle Hartwell is a woman who dreams of the spotlight. But dreams, they can curdle into motives. Let us test her story and see what shadows it casts." Hastings nodded, though his honest face betrayed unease. "She's a cool customer, Poirot. That scoff she gave when Toretti spoke of Celestina, it was downright chilly. Do you think she had a hand in this?" Poirot's moustache twitched. "We shall see, Hastings. The heart, it reveals itself in the smallest cracks. Come." They entered the rehearsal room. a cramped space with a scarred piano and a single mirror reflecting Elena's poised figure. She stopped singing, her auburn hair catching the light as she turned, her smile calculated, but not quite reaching her eyes. "Monsieur Poirot, Captain Hastings," she said, smoothing her skirt. "To what do I owe this visit?" "I'm preparing for tonight's performance. Should it go on?" "Admirable dedication," Poirot said, inclining his head. "But it is your actions on the night of Mademoiselle Montrose's disappearance that interest Hercule Poirot. You said you were in your dressing room when the commotion began, yet no one saw you there. Can you confirm this alibi?" Elena's fingers tightened on a sheet of music. "I was alone, practicing my scales. I didn't need an audience for that. When I heard the shouting, I came to the stage like everyone else. Why should I lie?" Poirot's gaze was steady, unyielding. "Perhaps, mademoiselle, because the understudy steps into the star's role when the star vanishes. A moment of glory, no? And you, I think, have long awaited such a moment." Elena's laugh was sharp, like breaking glass. "You think I'd harm Celestina for a role? I'm ambitious, yes, but not a monster. She was difficult, always demanding, always the center of everything, but I respected her talent." "Respect," Poirot echoed, stepping closer to the piano, where a lavender sachet lay among her belongings. "Yet Maestro Terretti spoke of your resentment, of words overheard, words that suggested you wished him to favor you over her. And this scent—" He lifted the sachet, sniffing delicately. "Lavender, like the faint trace on the threatening letters found in Celestina's dressing room. A coincidence, perhaps?" Elena's face paled, but she recovered quickly. "Lavender is common, Monsieur Poirot. Half the women in London use it. As for Terretti, he's a tyrant who sees threats in every shadow. I criticized his obsession with Celestina, yes, but that's hardly a crime." Poirot set the sachet down, his eyes never leaving hers. "No, but secrets, they can be crimes. Tell me, Mademoiselle Hartwell, what is your connection to Paris, to the scandal of Celeste Moreau?" The question struck like a thunderbolt. Elena's composure cracked, her hand flying to her throat. "Paris? I've never been to Paris. What are you implying?" Poirot's voice was soft, almost gentle. "The little grey cells, they have been busy. A source, a programme from a Parisian cabaret, tucked away in the Opera House's archive, lists an Elise Hart as a dancer in 1928, the same year Celeste Moreau fled a scandal. Elise Hart, Elena Hartwell, the names, they are close, no? And your face, it betrays a memory." Hastings, who had been silent, gasped. "Good Lord, Poirot, you mean she knew Celestina back then?" Elena's eyes darted to the door, as if seeking escape, but she steadied herself. "You're wrong," she said, her voice low. "I'm not Elise Hart. I was born in Bristol, trained in London, but—" She hesitated, her fingers twisting the music sheet. "I did hear of Celeste Moreau." "Who didn't? A singer accused of theft, ruined and gone. When I joined the company, I suspected Celestina might be her. The voice, the mannerisms, it fit, but I never said a word. Why would I?" Poirot's eyebrows rose. "Why indeed? Unless you saw profit in silence, or in exposing her. Did you write those letters, mademoiselle, to frighten her from the stage? Or did you know the man in the dark coat, the one seen near her dressing room?" Elena's lips parted, but no sound came. Then, in a rush, she said, "I saw him, yes. The night before she vanished. He was outside her door, slipping something under it, a note, I think. I didn't see his face, but he moved like someone who didn't want to be seen. I thought he was a stagehand, but now," her voice faltered, "I swear I had nothing to do with her disappearance." Poirot studied her, his expression unreadable. Merci, Mademoiselle Hartwell. Your candor, it is noted. But the truth, it is like a melody. It requires all the notes to be heard. As they left the rehearsal room, Hastings shook his head. Poirot, that was a bombshell. Elena knowing about Celestina's past, do you believe her story about the man and the note? Partially, Hastings, Poirot said, his voice low. She speaks truth, but not all of it. Her past, her motives, they are a shadow play. And this man in the dark coat, he is a recurring motif in our symphony. We must find him before the next act begins. The corridor stretched ahead, its shadows deepening as the majestic opera house whispered its secrets, waiting for Poirot to unravel them. Chapter 9. Blood and Grease Paint. The backstage of the majestic opera house was a maze of ropes, pulleys, and shadows, its narrow passages cluttered with props and costumes that seemed to whisper of the vanished Celestina Montrose. Hercule Poirot, his patent leather shoes navigating the creaking boards with care, moved with the precision of a man who saw order where others saw chaos. Captain Hastings followed, his honest face creased with unease, as they ventured deeper into the theatre's underbelly, where the gaslights flickered like wary sentinels. Poirot, Hastings said, ducking under a dangling sandbag, this place is a death trap. How do you expect to find anything here? It's all ropes and rags. Poirot's green eyes gleamed in the dim light. Mon ami, it is in the rags and ropes that the truth hides. The stage, it is a canvas of illusion, but its props, they speak when questioned. Let us see what they say. They began their search near the wings, where Celestina had last been seen fleeing mid-aria. The floor was scuffed, marked by the chaos of that night, but Poirot's attention was drawn to a small trapdoor, half hidden beneath a pile of discarded programs. He knelt, his gloved fingers brushing the wood, and lifted it to reveal a narrow space below, used for quick costume changes or stage effects. "Regardez, Hastings," Poirot said, pointing to a smudge on the trapdoor's edge. "A stain, dark, sticky. Not grease paint, I think, but blood." Hastings paled. "Blood? Good Lord, Poirot, you don't mean—" "I mean nothing yet," Poirot said, his voice calm but firm. "We must send this to the laboratory for analysis, but it suggests struggle or haste." He produced a small vial and carefully scraped the stain into it, sealing it with a cork. Their search continued to a nearby prop table, cluttered with wigs, swords, and a velvet cape from La Traviata. Poirot paused, lifting a single pearl earring, its mate missing. "This," he said, holding it to the light, "was part of Celestina's costume. Clara Wren mentioned a pair, yet only one remains. Where is its twin?" Hastings frowned. "Lost in the chaos, perhaps, or taken?" "Taken," Poirot murmured, "or left behind as a clue. And here." He bent to retrieve a small jar of rouge, its lid ajar, a faint smear of red on its rim. "This is not the shade Celestina wore. Her makeup was subtle, a rose tint. This is bold, almost garish. It does not belong to her." Hastings scratched his head. "Another performer's, then? Elena Hartwell, maybe?" "Perhaps," Poirot said, his eyes narrowing. "But observe the smear. It is fresh, as if applied in haste. And this?" He lifted a crumpled handkerchief, tucked behind a prop vase, its edge stained with the same garish rouge and a faint trace of lavender. "The scent again, Hastings. Lavender, like the letters, like Mademoiselle Hartwell's sachet. The threads, they begin to weave together." They moved to the costume rack, where Celestina's crimson gown had been stored before its removal to her dressing room. Poirot's fingers traced the hem of a nearby cloak, pausing at a tear in the fabric. "This tear," he said, "it is not from where. It is sharp, as if caught on something or someone in a struggle." Hastings shivered. "Poirot, this is grim. Blood, a missing earring, rouge, that doesn't match. Are we dealing with a crime scene?" Poirot's gaze swept the backstage, his mind assembling the fragments. A crime scene, oui, but also a performance. The blood, it may be real or staged. The earring, it is a prop left behind. The rouge, it is a signature of another player. The pattern, Hastings, it emerges like a melody from the discord. He turned to Tom Barker, the stage manager, who had been summoned to assist. Barker, his grizzled face wary, leaned against a prop column. "Monsieur Barker," Poirot said, "this trapdoor, when was it last used?" Barker scratched his chin. "Not during the show. It's for quick changes, but Celestina didn't need it that night. I checked it after she vanished, locked tight. And this cloak," Poirot continued, holding up the torn fabric. "Who bore it last?" Barker frowned. "That's from the chorus. Could have been anyone. Things get moved around backstage." Poirot nodded, his expression unreadable. "And the man in the dark coat, did he pass through here, near the trapdoor or props?" Barker hesitated. "Might have. I told you I saw him skulking about. Didn't think much of it till now." "Merci," Poirot said, dismissing him. As Barker retreated, Poirot turned to Hastings, his voice low. "The little grey cells, they hum, Hastings. The blood, the earring, the rouge, the lavender, they are notes in a score. And the man in the dark coat, he is the conductor's shadow. We are close, mon ami, to the heart of this drama." The backstage shadows deepened, the air thick with the promise of revelation. The majestic opera house held its breath, its secrets teetering on the edge of exposure. Chapter 10. The Patron's Secret. The majestic opera house, its grandeur dimmed by the pall of mystery, seemed to hold its breath. As Hercule Poirot and Captain Hastings ascended the marble staircase to the private box reserved for Lord Henry Ashworth, the opera's chief patron. The box overlooking the gilded auditorium was a cocoon of opulence. Velvet curtains, a crystal chandelier, and a mahogany table bearing a decanter of brandy. Yet the air was heavy with unease, as if the walls themselves sensed the weight of secrets. Poirot, his patent leather shoes silent on the plush carpet, surveyed the space with his piercing green eyes. "Mon ami," he said to Hastings, "a man like Lord Ashworth surrounds himself with luxury, yet luxury can be a mask. Let us see what lies beneath." Hastings, clutching his hat, frowned. "He's a Lord, Poirot. Surely he's above suspicion, though I must say his twitchiness the other day was odd." Poirot's moustache twitched with a faint smile. "No one, Hastings, is above the truth. The higher the station, the deeper the shadows. Let us question him." Lord Ashworth stood by the balcony, his silk cravat immaculate, but his face pale, his fingers toying nervously with his gold watch-chain. "Monsieur Poirot," said, his voice clipped, "this is highly irregular. I am a patron, not a suspect. I trust you have good reason for this intrusion." "Mais oui, milord," Poirot replied, his tone smooth but unyielding. "The reason is Mademoiselle Celestina Montrose, or should I say, Celeste Moreau. Your connection to her, it was more than that of a patron, was it not?" Ashworth's jaw tightened, his eyes darting to the door. "I told you, I admired her talent. I funded her costumes, her tours, nothing more." Poirot stepped closer, his gaze fixed on Ashworth's trembling fingers. "And yet, milord, the little grey cells, they have been busy. A letter, found among Celestina's papers, not a threat, but a plea. It spoke of debts unpaid and promises broken. It was signed with your initials. Explain, if you please." Hastings gasped. "Good Lord, Poirot, you didn't mention that letter before." Poirot's eyes never left Ashworth. "Patience, Hastings. Some clues, they must ripen. Milord, what debts they must ripen. Milord, what debts did Celestina speak of?" Ashworth sank into a chair, his composure cracking. "It's true," he said, his voice low. I was closer to Celestina than I should have been. She was enchanting, not just her voice, but her spirit. We met privately, a few dinners, walks in the park. Nothing scandalous, but unwise. She began to ask for money, small sums at first, then more. She said she needed it for her family, for debts from her past in Paris. "Paris?" Poirot echoed. "As Celeste Moreau, perhaps. You knew of her scandal, no?" Ashworth nodded, his face ashen. "She confided in me last year. Said she'd been falsely accused of theft, forced to flee. I believed her. I wanted to help her rebuild. But then—" He hesitated, his fingers gripping the watch chain. "A month ago, someone sent me a note. It threatened to expose my affection for her unless I paid £5,000. "Blackmail!" Hastings exclaimed, his eyes wide. "Who sent it?" "I don't know," Ashworth said, his voice trembling. "The note was typed, left in my box here at the Opera House. I paid half, left the money in a prop chest backstage, as instructed. But then Celestina vanished, and I've heard nothing since." Poirot's eyes narrowed. "A typed note, you say? Most curious. The threatening letters to Celestina and Maestro Terretti were handwritten. Yet this is different. And this prop chest, where is it?" Ashworth gestured vaguely. "Near the wings by the trapdoor. It's used for costumes, odds and ends." Poirot's mind raced, recalling the bloodstain on the trapdoor and the torn cloak nearby. "Milord, did you see anyone suspicious near this chest? A man in a dark coat, perhaps?" Ashworth frowned. I'm not sure. There was a fellow loitering backstage before the performance, but I didn't get a good look. I thought he was a delivery man." "Mon Dieu," Poirot murmured. "This man, he is like a ghost, appearing in every shadow. We must find this chest." They descended to the backstage area, where the prop chest stood, its lid scarred and heavy. Poirot opened it, revealing a jumble of fabric and trinkets. At the bottom, half hidden under a moth-eaten shawl, was a small locked box. Poirot's gloved fingers pried it open, revealing a bundle of pound notes, Ashworth's payment, and a single crumpled letter typed with the words "More, or the world will know." "Blackmail, indeed," Poirot said, his voice grave. "But this letter, it is not alone." He lifted a tiny scrap of fabric caught in the box's hinge. A crimson thread, matching Celestina's gown. "This thread, it ties the blackmail to our songbird. The pattern, Hastings, it grows clearer." Hastings shook his head. "Poirot, this is a tangle. Ashworth's being blackmailed. Celestina's involved somehow, and that thread. Does it mean she was here at the chest?" "Perhaps," Poirot said, slipping the letter and thread into an envelope. "Or perhaps someone wishes us to think so. The blackmailer, they play a dangerous game, and Celestina, she was either victim or accomplice. We must learn which." As they left the backstage, the crimson curtain swayed gently, as if mocking their progress. The majestic opera house held its secrets close, but Poirot's little grey cells were closing in. Chapter 11. Smoke and Mirrors. The stage of the majestic opera house stood silent, its crimson curtain drawn back to reveal the stark machinery of the theatre, ropes, pulleys, and the trapdoor where a bloodstain had whispered of violence. Hercule Poirot, his small frame commanding the vast space, had gathered the principal figures of the opera company at dusk, their faces lit by the flickering gaslights. Maestro Giovanni Torretti, Elena Hartwell, Lord Henry Ashworth, Julian Vance, Clara Wren, and the stage manager Tom Barker stood in a tense semicircle, their eyes wary as Poirot paced before them. Captain Hastings at Poirot's side clutched a notebook, his expression a mix of anticipation and dread. "Mes amis," Poirot began, his voice clear and deliberate. The disappearance of Mademoiselle Celestina Montrose was no mere accident. It was a performance, a carefully staged illusion. Tonight, Hercule Poirot will recreate the night of her vanishing, and the truth, it will step into the spotlight. Hastings leaned close, whispering, "Poirot, are you sure about this? Recreating the scene, it's a bold move." Poirot's mustache twitched. "Bold, oui, but necessary. The stage, it is a place of smoke and mirrors, but the little grey cells, they see through the haze. Observe." He gestured to the trapdoor, now marked with chalk to indicate where Celestina had stood during her aria. Mademoiselle Montrose was here, singing Violetta's lament. She faltered, clutched her throat, and fled into the wings. There. He pointed to the right wing, where the crimson gown had been found, but she did not vanish into thin air. No, she descended through this trapdoor. Tom Barker frowned, his grizzled face skeptical. "That trapdoor was locked, Monsieur Poirot. I checked it myself." "Précisément," Poirot said, his eyes gleaming. "Locked, but not immovable. A key was used, one you keep in the stage manager's box. But another key exists, does it not? One kept by the wardrobe mistress, Mademoiselle Wren." Clara Wren gasped, her hands clutching her shawl. I never touched it. My key's been in my sewing kit since last month." Poirot raised a hand, silencing her. "Patience, mademoiselle. Let us proceed." He moved to the prop table, where the single pearl earring, the garish rouge, and the torn cloak had been found. These items, they tell a story. The earring, part of Celestina's costume, was left here deliberately. The rouge, too bold for her, belongs to another, Mademoiselle Hartwell, whose lavender sachet matches the scent on the threatening letters. Elena Hartwell's face flushed. "I told you, lavender is common. You can't prove I wrote those letters." "I do not need to," Poirot said calmly. "The letters, they were a distraction, meant to sow fear. But the true deception lies elsewhere." He turned to the prop chest, where Lord Ashworth's blackmail payment and the crimson thread had been found. This chest, it held the price of a secret. Lord Ashworth's, it held the price of a secret. Lord Ashworth's payments to a blackmailer. But the crimson thread, it links to Celestina's gown, suggesting she was here, or that someone wished us to think so. Lord Ashworth shifted uncomfortably, his watch chain glinting. "I told you everything, Poirot. I paid to protect her, nothing more." Poirot's gaze sharpened. "No, milord. You paid to protect yourself. Your relationship with Celestina, it was more than patronage. She knew your financial troubles, your debts. She used her past as Celeste Moreau to draw you in, did she not? And someone else knew, someone who typed a note to extort you." Torretti's baton trembled in his hand. "This is madness. Celestina was my muse, not a schemer." "Was she?" Poirot said, turning to the conductor. "Or was she a woman trapped by her past, manipulated by those who knew it? The note in your score, you cannot control her forever. It was a warning, maestro, but not from an enemy. It was from someone who loved her." All eyes turned to Julian Vance, the tenor whose face had paled. I didn't write it," he stammered. "I cared for her, yes, but I'd never hurt her." Poirot nodded, his voice soft but relentless. "You cared, oui, but you also knew her as Celeste Moreau. You were in Paris, Monsieur Vance. a young chorus singer in 1928. You saw her disgrace, and you followed her to Vienna to London, carrying her locket as a token of devotion. But devotion can become desperation. Vance's eyes filled with tears. I only wanted to protect her. She was terrified. Said someone was after her, a man from her past. I saw him that night, in a dark coat, near the trapdoor. Poirot's eyes gleamed. The man in the dark coat. Oui, he is the key. He turned to the trapdoor, kneeling to examine the bloodstain, now confirmed by the laboratory as human blood. This blood, it was not Celestina's. It was a diversion, painted on the trapdoor to suggest violence. But the true vanishing was simpler. A timed descent, a costume change, a cloak to cover her exit. Celestina did not flee, she was taken. Hastings gasped. Taken? By whom, Poirot? Poirot rose, his gaze sweeping the group. By the one who knew her every move, who had access to her costumes, her keys, her secrets. The one who wrote the threatening letters to mask a deeper plan. Mademoiselle Clara Wren. Clara's face crumpled, her hands shaking. No, I loved Celestina. I'd never. You loved her, Poirot interrupted. But you also loved another. The man in the dark coat, your brother Robert Wren, a stagehand dismissed from the Paris Opera for theft, the same theft blamed on Celeste Moreau. He followed her here, seeking revenge, and you helped him, unwittingly or not, by providing the key to the trapdoor. Clara sobbed, collapsing into a chair. I didn't know he'd take her. He said he just wanted to talk, to make her confess. I gave him the key, but I didn't know. Poirot's voice was gentle but firm. The truth, it is painful, but it is free. Celestina is alive, hidden by your brother. We will find her. The stage fell silent, the crimson curtain swaying as if in applause for the unravelling of its secrets. Chapter 12. The Final Curtain. The auditorium of the majestic opera house was a sea of shadows. Its gilded arches and velvet seats bathed in the soft glow of gaslights turned low. The crimson curtain, drawn back, framed the stage where Hercule Poirot stood, his small figure commanding the vast space with an authority that silenced the restless murmurs of the assembled company. Maestro Giovanni Torretti, Elena Hartwell, Lord Henry Ashworth, Julian Vance, Clara Wren, and Tom Barker sat in the front row, their faces a gallery of tension and dread. Captain Hastings at Poirot's side clutched his notebook, his eyes wide with anticipation. "Mes amis," Poirot began, his voice resonant, cutting through the heavy air. The disappearance of Mademoiselle Celestina Montrose was no mere vanishing act. It was a symphony of deception, played with precision by a master hand. Tonight, Hercule Poirot will reveal the killer, and the curtain will fall on this tragedy. Hastings whispered, "Poirot, you said she was alive. A killer? This is a twist." Poirot's moustache twitched, his green eyes gleaming. "Patience, mon ami. The truth, it unfolds like a score, note by note. Let us begin." He paced the stage, his gloved hands clasped behind his back. Mademoiselle Montrose, or Celeste Moreau, was a woman pursued by her past, a scandal in Paris, a theft she did not commit. She fled, rebuilt her life, but the shadows followed. Threatening letters, a blackmail scheme, a man in a dark coat. These were the props of her final act. But the question is, who directed this drama? He turned to Clara Wren, whose tear-streaked face betrayed her guilt. "Mademoiselle Wren, you confessed to aiding your brother Robert Wren, a man wronged in Paris, blamed for the theft pinned on Celeste. You gave him the key to the trapdoor, believing he sought only to confront her. But Robert's anger ran deeper, did it not?" Clara sobbed, her voice barely audible. "He swore he just wanted to talk. I didn't know he'd hurt her." Poirot nodded, his gaze softening but unrelenting. But Robert is not the killer. He took Celestina, yes, through the trapdoor, using the cloak to conceal her. The bloodstain was theatrical, a ruse to suggest violence, but Celestina is alive, hidden in a warehouse near the Thames, as my inquiries with the police have confirmed. Robert sought revenge, not murder. The true killer is another. A gasp rippled through the group. Toretti's baton fell to the floor with a clatter. "Another? Then who?" he demanded. Poirot turned to Elena Hartwell, whose auburn hair gleamed under the lights, her face a mask of composure. "Mademoiselle Hartwell, you played your role well. The ambitious understudy, always in Celestina's shadow, with a lavender sachet that scented the threatening letters. You knew her as Celeste Moreau from Paris, where you danced as Elise Hart. You wrote those letters not to harm her, but to frighten her from the stage, to claim your moment." Elena's lips parted, but Poirot raised a hand. "No, do not deny it. The handwriting, it was disguised, but the lavender betrayed you. Yet you, too, are not the killer." He pivoted to Lord Ashworth, whose fingers clutched his watch chain. "Milord, your blackmail was a distraction, your payments a shield for your indiscretions. You loved Celestina, perhaps, but you did not kill her." Ashworth sagged, relief warring with shame. "Then who, Poirot? Who?" Poirot's gaze settled on Julian Vance, the tenor, whose soulful eyes were now wide with fear. "Monsieur Vance, you loved Celestina truly. You carried her locket, knew her past, followed her from Paris to London. You saw her fear, her desperation, as Robert Wren closed in. You tried to protect her, but your love became a poison." Vance shook his head, his voice breaking. "No, I'd never hurt her. I told you, I saw the man in the dark coat. Enough!" Poirot's voice was a whip crack. The man in the dark coat was Robert Wren, but he was not alone that night. You, Monsieur Vance, were with him. You confronted Celestina in the warehouse, after Robert took her. You begged her to flee with you, to start anew, but she refused, fearing her past would always find her. In a moment of rage, you struck her, not with a weapon, but with a prop, a heavy candelabrum from the set. The blow was fatal." Vance collapsed, sobbing. "It was an accident. I loved her. She wouldn't listen. She said she'd rather die than live in hiding. I didn't mean to." Poirot's voice was grave. "The candelabrum, its base stained with blood, was found in the warehouse this morning, hidden under a tarp. The police have it, and they have Robert Wren, who confessed to his part but named you as the one who ended her life." The auditorium was silent, the weight of the truth crushing. Toretti buried his face in his hands. Elena stared blankly, and Clara's sobs echoed. Ashworth's watch chain slipped from his fingers, clattering to the floor. Poirot stepped forward, his voice softening. "The heart, it is a fragile thing, mes amis. Love, jealousy, revenge, they are notes in a tragic aria. Monsieur Vance, you will face justice, but Celestina's song, it will not be forgotten." As the police, summoned by Poirot, led Vance away, the crimson curtain swayed, as if bowing to the end of the performance. The majestic opera house exhaled, its secrets laid bare under Poirot's unyielding gaze. Chapter 13. Epilogue. After the applause. The majestic opera house stood quiet under a grey London sky, its golden facade muted, as if in mourning for its lost songbird. A week had passed since Hercule Poirot's dramatic revelation on its stage, and the echoes of Celestina Montrose's final aria seemed to linger in the air. The auditorium, once alive with the rustle of silk and the hum of anticipation, was now empty, save for Poirot and Captain Hastings, who sat in the front row, the crimson curtain drawn close like a shroud. Hastings, his hat resting on his knee, sighed heavily. "It's a grim business, Poirot. Celestina dead, Vance in custody, and the opera house facing ruin. I thought we'd save her, not uncover a tragedy." Poirot, his gloved hands folded neatly, gazed at the curtain, his green eyes reflective. "Mon ami, the truth, it is not always a saviour. Sometimes it is a mirror, showing us the flaws of the human heart. But come, let us review the aftermath, for every drama must have its final bow." The consequences of the case had rippled through the opera company like a discordant note. Julian Vance, the tenor whose love for Celestina had turned fatal, awaited trial. His confession, wrung from a broken heart, had spared him the gallows, but his career and spirit were shattered. Robert Wren, Clara's brother, had been arrested for kidnapping, his revenge against Celestina for the Paris scandal that had ruined him, now a footnote in her tragic end. Clara Wren, consumed by guilt for her unwitting role, had resigned as wardrobe mistress, retreating to a quiet life in the countryside, her sewing kit untouched. Maestro Giovanni Torretti, his passion dimmed, had cancelled the season, unable to bear the stage without his muse. Rumours swirled that he planned to return to Italy, his baton silent. Elena Hartwell, cleared of murder but exposed as the writer of the threatening letters, faced a tarnished reputation. Yet her ambition burned undeterred. She had already secured a minor role in a rival company, her eyes set on a new spotlight. Lord Henry Ashworth, his financial troubles laid bare, had withdrawn his patronage, selling assets to settle his debts and avoid further scandal. The blackmail scheme, traced to a petty clerk in the opera house who had overheard his indiscretions, was resolved with a swift arrest. The Majestic itself teetered on the edge of closure, its manager, Reginald Thorne, scrambling to find new patrons. Yet the public's fascination with Celestina's story, her rise as Celeste Moreau, her fall and her tragic end, had sparked a morbid curiosity, filling the box office for the few performances that limped on. Hastings shook his head. "It's all so senseless, Poirot. Celestina was a victim of her past, of love, of jealousy. Couldn't we have stopped it?" Poirot's voice was soft, almost wistful. "The human heart, Hastings, it is a mystery deeper than any crime. Celestina, she fled one scandal, only to find another. Vance loved her, yet his love became a cage. Clara sought to protect her brother, yet opened the door to disaster. Ashworth, Torretti, Hartwell, all played their parts driven by passion, pride, or greed. We cannot stop the heart's desires, only reveal their consequences." He rose, adjusting his bow tie, his gaze lingering on the stage. Celestina's song, it was her truth, her escape. Even in death it resonates. The little grey cells, they have done their work, but the soul, it mourns. Hastings stood, his expression softening. "You're a sentimental old chap, Poirot, for all your logic. What now? Back to Baker Street for a cup of tea?" Poirot smiled faintly. "No, mon ami. A tisane, perhaps, and a moment to reflect. The world, it spins on, but for now, the curtain falls." As they left the auditorium, the crimson curtain stirred gently, as if stirred by an unseen breeze. The majestic opera house stood silent, its stage empty, but the memory of Celestina Montrose's voice lingered, her haunting melody that would never fade.